How's it going? I'm Pat. I'm alcoholic. Now, I get pretty nervous like an hour before these things start. And I was sitting over there, and it's kind of hard to breathe with the mask, and I'm like hyperventilating almost. I was thinking maybe I would have calmed down if I dipped this in some gasoline beforehand or some toxic glue. But anyways, I want to thank Mike for asking me to speak. He's been a really good friend to me, and regardless of that, I'm still not going to name my baby after you. So I just want to put that out there. All right. Let's see. No, I'm not. All right. My sobriety date is March 1st, 2019. I'm involved in a few groups. Sunday morning men's stag that's held here 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. I'm the GSR for that group, and I like to be here every week for that. And then Monday at 5:30, the beginners 1, 2, 3 meeting. So if you're looking for some cool meetings to check out besides this one, feel free to stop by. You can usually find me there. So, don't really know what I want to talk about tonight. Probably just tell a little bit of my story, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and share a little bit about my experience with the 12 steps of AA. So, I always like to say that I moved around a bit as a kid, growing up. Probably less than a good amount of people, but more than some people. And really, it doesn't really matter. I think alcoholics, there's people who are born into horrible conditions, and they turn out to be fabulous, wonderful, trustworthy people, and I certainly am not one of them. I moved around, so by the time I was in 6th grade, I had been in 5 different schools, and what I took from that was that it was just I didn't like getting close to people, because I felt like as soon as I got close to people, I would have to leave or they would leave, and I kind of stopped trying. After the last move, I was just like, screw this, I'm not into it, and I went from a kid who, I don't know if you guys can relate. I grew up in like a nice neighborhood, meaning there was a bunch of kids my age. We'd have like bonfires and play kick the can and ghost in the graveyard and get go get ice cream from the ice cream man, and I was happy, and then like something happened, of course involving around those movings, but I started just thinking too much, I feel like, and it was during that time, by the time I was in like 5th grade, that the guy that used to be like a class clown and fun to be around became scared and isolated and didn't really talk that much to people. And then my mind just kind of went on overdrive. So I actually used to be against drugs and alcohol. I wrote a paper for DARE, and then they had me speak in front of the whole school, and I got a medal, and it was about why drugs and alcohol are bad and you shouldn't use them, and I truly believed it. See, the DARE officers and the adults, they like to tell you the bad things about drugs and alcohol, and if you're only hearing the bad things, they do sound pretty bad. They talk about the destroyed lives and the car wrecks and addiction and everything that goes along with that. But they fail to mention the really good parts of drugs and alcohol, that it'll make your bad feelings turn good, that, I can find a way to be okay regardless of what's going on in my life. And you know how hard it is to be a middle school kid. So I saw my sister, who was a few years older than me. I grew up in Pennsylvania, by the way, mostly. And she was a few years older than me, and she was a lot like me. She wasn't special or anything, but she started like hanging out with friends, going to parties, drinking some, smoking some weed, and I noticed that not that much bad stuff was happening to her. I was like worried. I was like, something bad is going to happen. But you watch her and she's having a blast. She's making all these friends. She's becoming popular. She has things to do. People like her. She's having a good time, coming home a little tipsy, and that looks like a lot of fun, honestly. And these ideas about drugs and alcohol started to change for me because I saw some proof that maybe what I thought about these things were wrong. And I came to a point it was right before high school, I became willing to try drugs and alcohol. I thought maybe it could work for me too. So I remember the difference between me and a non-alcoholic is the effect that alcohol has on me. I drink, and there's something happens between like the second, third, fourth, somewhere between like the third and sixth drink. This magic happens where, you hear AA speakers talk about it all the time. You start to feel like taller, smarter, funnier, and I don't know if all that's true, but I just felt like I didn't really care too much anymore about what people thought. I felt like I had always been a prisoner of my own mind. And that's absolutely true. I had been a prisoner of my own mind. And I felt like alcohol released me from that. I always knew, like, when I was going through this period of being shy and quiet, that inside of me was this guy who was just wanted to come out and just have a good time and have fun and be a part of. But all I could do was think about how different I was from everyone. And I don't know if everyone feels that way, non-alcoholic or not. But what I realized soon was that alcohol takes that away, and I felt I could come out to play, I could be a part of. So I noticed also that other drugs had the same effect, and I quickly became an amateur chemist, pharmacist, trying things out, seeing what would make me feel good. The plan was to only drink on weekends, and I didn't want to become, a problem drinker, an alcoholic, or a drug addict, and I didn't think that would be possible for a guy like me. So, let's see. For me, high school, I had a lot of fun. I became friends with a lot of people. I was invited to parties. I had a good time. Alcohol really worked really well for me. I could get out of myself, like I said. And there wasn't much consequences. I heard a speaker once talk about when we're drinking, it kind of reminds him of like a roulette wheel, where there's a lot of good things that happen, and every once in a while a bad thing happens. And every time you go drink, you spin the wheel and you see what happens. And for me, when I was younger through high school, it was very rare that something bad happened. It was all good stuff. The worst that would happen is my mom would find my bong or something like that, and I'd get in trouble, and I would just get loaded in my basement, and it really wasn't a big deal. And it seemed like as time progressed, there was just more bad things that got introduced to that roulette wheel, like some sick joke. And by the time I was 18, I just graduated high school, and 2 days after I turned 18, I got arrested for the first time, of course. And I got arrested for stealing stuff, which is part of my story there. I really like getting drunk and stealing stuff. Not sure how that started, but I don't know. I would black out and wake up with things that weren't mine. So, let's see. I got put on probation, and, they... I got put on this probation where if I were to complete it, they would drop all the charges, and it would be no big deal. I had to do a bunch of community service and go to some classes and whatnot. But that was about it. And after about a month or so, I got an underage from the same police officer that had arrested me for stealing stuff. So they were, needless to say, pretty upset. And they kicked me off of that probation and put me on just like regular old adult probation. And so I was getting drug tested once a month. And, I knew exactly when I would have my test, the day and the time and where it would be. And I still failed to pass it regularly. The first few times were a fluke. I had a prescription for some pain meds once, and I brought it in. She's like, "You're not even, what do you, brought that into the office?" And I don't know. So I went off to college, before stuff started to get pretty bad. And I went off to college not to learn anything really. I went because I wanted to get loaded and try to hook up with chicks. Maybe some of you guys can relate to that. I didn't really have any motives to expand my mind and learn things. It was just to have a good time. My life has been sincerely just about having a good time, like how can I catch the biggest buzz? Once I found that you could alter your mind and like actually feel good, that was what I chased. Going from a guy who just absolutely couldn't stand being in his own body to finding this power that made me be okay regardless of what's going on. I mean, that was a phenomenon for me. So I went off to school and something happened. I talked about that between like 3 to 6 drinks where this magic happens, and I was always shooting for that sweet spot. But at the beginning of college, I would just overshoot the mark. I'd get really excited, and before I even went out, I'd be taking, pre-gaming, but I would be drinking before the pre-game, and then, so I would overshoot the mark. I would drink too fast, and I would start getting too drunk, and it just seemed like the next one would be the one that would do it for me. So I started getting in trouble, and I started being asked not to come back to parties, and I don't know, I felt really alone. I was at a party school, and I felt like no one was partying like me, or I couldn't get along with these people. I had the thing that made me feel better, the thing that I had discovered 4 or 5 years ago, but it wasn't really working for me anymore. I couldn't seem to get drunk enough, and then when I finally did, people didn't like the way I acted. I didn't have a problem with it, but since they didn't like it. So I withdrew from that school and went back home because I thought that, my high school friends, they understood. I'll go home and they'll rejoice at my return. And most of the people were already off at their own school, having a good time growing up, living their lives, experiencing things, and getting through them. And I was simply just getting loaded as often as I could, because why would I do anything else? See, the thing is, as long as alcohol and drugs really work for me, why would I try to grow up? Why would I try to do something new? So if you're here and alcohol and drugs still work for you, that's absolutely fine. Maybe you'll hear something down the line. Maybe you'll hear something I say tonight, and down the line it'll click. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I get nervous here before I speak because I'm afraid what people will think of me. I'm afraid of looking bad, right? And the truth is, I really have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just a guy who found that life became impossible. I couldn't imagine a life drunk, and I couldn't imagine a life sober. I had been coming around to AA for 7, 8 years, never really dove into it, and I realized maybe if I did this time, something might happen, and then something did happen, and I got sober, and my life has blossomed since then. But I didn't make up any of this stuff. I just started doing the things that they told me to do. So, anyways, let's see, where was I? So I kept failing drug tests, and my probation officer was pretty upset about that, and they said you can either go to rehab or go to jail, and naturally I went to rehab because I didn't feel like a criminal. She was calling me like a drug addict and alcoholic, which I didn't like very much. I thought it was kind of rude of her to assume that of me. She didn't know, and let's see. I went off to rehab, and I was convinced, pop culture, they make rehab seem like somewhere where you just kind of cool off for a little bit, which kind of is a place where you just cool off for a little bit in most cases, if you think about it. But I thought they would teach me how to stop using hard drugs and to drink normally, to maybe do some therapy, figure some stuff out, and go on my way, and life would be okay. I didn't know that they were talking about joining Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, or whatever fellowship you choose to be in, whatever you identify with. And you're supposed to radically change your life. I wasn't expecting all that. But what I did get from that is that these guys came into the rehab that were probably my age, and I was 19 at the time, and they started talking about finding a way to be okay regardless of their present circumstances. They spoke my language. They drank like me. They drank for the same reasons as me. But now they weren't drinking, and they were okay. In fact, they were good, and I could see it in their eyes. That interested me. Because by this time, like I talk about it, like on the outside, it wasn't, well, I mean, I don't know. Some people's have bottoms that are not even there, but for me, I was pretty miserable. All my friends, the ones that were around still, didn't want to be around me. I had a friend say to me, we don't like you when you're sober because you're just irritable and you just want to get drunk, and we don't like you when you're drunk because you always go too far and make an ass of yourself, and you're just hard to be around. You're hard to be friends with. And by the end of the conversation, I got him apologizing to me for some stuff, as we know how to do. And, you know, he was like my best friend growing up, and so that didn't really feel good. Most of the people really didn't want to be around me anymore. I was miserable. I was doing some pretty crappy things when no one was looking. I had a lot of shame. If, you know, I was afraid people would find out about who I was. You know, like the alcoholic, they talk about the alcoholic living the double life. I tried to portray myself as something to my family, to my friends, to the people around me, but the way I was living was very different from that. And people were starting to notice, and people didn't really want to be a part of it. I ended up going to a longer-term rehab after that, as they like to send you to, and I learned a little more about AA and this whole sobriety thing, and mostly what I found was like a fellowship of some guys who were my age trying to do the same thing as me, who were lost and didn't really know where they were going, and they just got sent here or they ended up here, and it's like, I don't know, I could relate with these people. You know, they drank like me, they talked like me, and they were lost just like me. The problem is I didn't really find anyone that I could look up to that well and grow towards. I kind of stayed in that crowd, and I ended up staying sober after a brief relapse for about 2 years. And those years were you know, they were pretty good. I like I said, I had that fellowship. I got involved in AA, and to some degree I was on like a young people's committee for a conference. And, you know, but the thing is that my character hadn't really changed that much. My parents were still paying a lot of my bills. I was irresponsible with money. I again was living the double life. You know, I could come up and say these really nice things, but still treat people and treat women poorly when no one was looking. And not much had changed internally. My character pretty much stayed the same. I found meetings to be helpful. But as far as an overall personality change, one had not entirely occurred. Don't get me wrong, there was good in that. And anyone who has time before that will admit that, yes, there was absolutely good in that. But what I've learned to do now is to see a little bit of the bigger picture, because I truly didn't want to drink again after being sober for a while. I was like, this is the way I want to live. And I think there comes a time in everyone's sobriety where you have these moments, you stand at once again another turning point, and you're either going to grow or you're either going to go. Are you going to do the next indicated right thing and try to live by this God consciousness? Are you going to try to take suggestions from a sponsor and listen to your gut and do something new? Or are we going to do the same old thing? And these turning points seem very minuscule, that they don't really mean all that much. But when you look at the big picture, you can point these things out and realize that if I went this way with this small thing, it would have started a chain of circumstances that would have changed everything. But I instead went this way, and it took me to shit. So I ended up drinking after a few years being sober. And what had happened to me is that my alcoholism had progressed. You hear about AA speakers talking about this, even when you're not drinking. If you haven't experienced it, I experienced it, and my alcoholism had progressed. Not only was I drinking, I was drinking a lot more than I had been before. I started blacking out, which was nothing new. I would black out every once in a while. But for this time, I was blacking out nearly every time, and then I blacked out for 4 days on end. I started drinking, and then it was 4 days later, and that was new for me. I'd never experienced anything like that. It was kind of scary. Let's see. I went on a few benders there, and then I went back to where I was living, And I thought I could just, once I decided that I didn't want to drink anymore, I had my fun, if you want to call that. You know what, it's funny, because on the way to the liquor store, I'm listening to Rage Against the Machine thinking this is going to be a fantastic night. And then the next thing I know, it's 4 days later, and my parents are disgusted with me, and I'm sleeping in my own squalor. It's a mess, you know. So that was not the plan, but that is usually what happens. So I went back to where I was living before, and I thought I'd jump right back into AA, but it turns out it's not that easy. I agree with people that it's easier to stay sober than to get sober, 100%. When you're sober, there's always a turning point, I believe. I think we have them every day in our lives. What are we going to do? Are we going to do my way, or are we going to try to do the AA program way? What am I going to do, right? These first 3 steps, learning how to practically apply them. Can I manage my own life very effectively? Sure, I can manage my own life, but how's it going? Do you want to kill yourself, Pat? That's a good question. Sometimes I do. Maybe you're willing to try something new. I don't know. I'm not in enough pain, you know? And just going through that on a regular basis and learning how to grow or go. So, I digress. Let's see. Where was I? So I went back home, and it wasn't as easy as I thought to get back involved in AA. So I started, I didn't like how everything had changed. People weren't treating me the same after that I had drank. And my head just took control of me. I ended up going on another bender, and I woke up in a jail cell. I had been stealing stuff again, you guessed it. And I had picked up I was stealing stuff in broad daylight from people's cars and garages. It was dark when I started, but then it was light when they caught me. And they just were watching me, writing down all the places I was going into. When they got bored, they were like, all right, let's go get them. And they got me, and they racked up like 26 misdemeanors, right? And they ended up dropping a good amount of them. But it wasn't enough to be like not a big deal. It was still a big deal, so they put me on drug court, which is no bueno if you're not ready to quit drinking. The goal with drug court where I was from is that if you complete it and you don't get screwed up and you start living better, they'll drop all the charges and you move on with your life, and it's no big deal. But if you continue to drink, you go to prison. And so I thought, well, I don't want to go to jail again. I hated my experience in jail. Waking up in a jail cell, not really knowing what I was doing there, I felt like I was the victim. You know, I don't feel like I'm a criminal. You know, I just like to get drunk and steal stuff. Is that a crime? It turns out it's a crime. So, anyways, I thought that I was convinced. I remember clear as day sitting in that jail cell by myself for 5 days straight. Because that's how it was called classification, and you have to sit in the jail cell by yourself until they put you on the block. And I was just in my own head for 5 days. First I detoxed for like the first day and a half, and then I couldn't sleep anymore, and I had to just think, you know. And I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but it's absolutely horrible. You know, if it's just me and me, there's nothing I can put between. I'm like bashing my head against the wall like a crazy person, because I felt like a crazy person. I couldn't believe that I had done this, you know. A guy like me who everyone expected great things from. I've always been smart, you know. I could do well in school without trying that hard. I did okay in sports, you know. People liked me for the most part. And then things had turned on me, you know. And I couldn't believe that I was here. And I made the decision, the first time in my life, that I said, I am never going to drink again. Ever. And I meant it with all my heart. The book talks about it. You know, swearing off with or without a solemn oath, you know. I was convinced I would never drink again, and I would do whatever it takes. So I got out of jail, and by the way, that was in like 2015. I didn't get sober till 19, so you're in for a treat, you guys. I got sober for a few months there, and something happens to me once I get sober. I might have been in the worst possible situation, right? Sitting in the jail cell. Some people have different experiences and they think, Pat, I've been to jail a million times. I've been much worse than you. And then you must understand what I'm talking about, where it's really bad and you think you'll never drink again, but a few months later you're obsessing about drinking. And how did this happen? What has changed? The first week I get out of jail and I get a job, and I'm so grateful to be working there. I'm so grateful to the probation officer that they're letting me not go to prison right now. That's a great deal. My parents, thank you for coming into town and supporting me. And a few weeks go by, and now my boss is a complete jerk. The probation officer, all she does is bitch at me, and I have to go pee every day. It's like, come on. And then my parents are nagging at me, and it's like nothing has changed. The truth is nothing has changed. But my mind starts turning on me. My ego starts to come back, in essence. I think I start listening to this voice in my head that's always been dictating and litigating the way that I live. Telling me that this is what's going on and this is what you need to do about it. And I always just said, okay, that sounds great. You must be right because you're a voice in my head. You must be right. And so I would just go on my merry way, believing everything that my head told me. The problem is that when I listen to my head, I become restless, irritable, and discontent. I look for problems. I don't know if anyone can relate. I heard a speaker call it a problem-seeking missile. I'm looking for things to bitch about, to complain about, to feel like, no, this isn't right. They're treating me poorly. And I look for this stuff actively, not actively, but my mind does it, right, without me even realizing it. And before you know it, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. Basically, my problem is, as an alcoholic, I'm not allowed to feel restless, irritable, and discontent for very long. I can for a little bit, but only for a little bit. It's only a matter of time before this idea that alcohol is going to kill you, Pat. If you drink again, do you remember what happened last time? Something happens. They talk about it in the doctor's opinion. If I'm restless, irritable, and discontent for a little bit, I can't remember, this is from a different page, but I can't remember with sufficient force how bad it actually was the last time, whether it be a day, a week, a month, or a year ago. I simply don't remember. I can't remember emotionally how bad it was. And what I start doing is justifying and rationalizing why this time, if I drank, or maybe do a little kratom or something, this time it's going to be different. You know what I mean? It's not gonna be the same way. I know it. I know what I did wrong last time, and it happens like that too. I hadn't been thinking about drinking for a little bit, but then it hit me, and I remember I was working at a fine dining restaurant, and I was serving alcohol to people, which I did regularly. But all of a sudden, it hit me, and I needed to get drunk. And this is a funny story, devastating, but funny. I knew that I couldn't get drunk at work there because people would notice, and I might have to go get a breathalyzer and a drug test in the morning. So I was able to hold it off for that night because I hadn't drank yet. The allergy hadn't been kicked on. And when I talk about this allergy, for me, is once I start drinking, I can't really control what's going to happen next. I told you I was only going to have 2, but after I have 2, I think 2 was a terribly stupid number. I really undershot it. Just 3. 3 is a better number. 6. 6 was always my number. I have some stories about 6. And so I ended up waiting till the next morning. I called in, didn't have to go in for my drug test, and so I shot off to the nearest place that was open to get some beer. I'm not a beer drinker. I like liquor. Liquor's quicker, right? So that's why I drink liquor, because it gets me there quicker. Anyways, it was maybe 6 hours later that I crashed into a car. I had overdosed behind the wheel. I was not planning on doing drugs, but drugs go really good with alcohol. And like I said, I have this allergy that I don't know what's going to happen once I start drinking. I'm a really decent guy when I'm sober, for the most part. Keep me sober for a few months and I'll start doing horrible things while I'm sober just to make myself feel better. But then there's only so much that I can put between me and me. There's nothing else. It's just me. And all I can think about is, God damn it, I am not okay. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And I know the one thing that works for me. Well, it didn't work so good last time, but maybe this time it'll be different. And that delusion comes back, even though I had sworn off. So they put me in jail for a while, needless to say. And I don't really remember that much, all that happened the next year or so. Just kind of horribly sober, house arrest for a bit. rehabs, counselors, a lot of loneliness. They ended up sending me out to Florida to do a little Florida shuffle there. And for mental health reasons. They didn't know I was getting drunk, but they knew something was seriously wrong with me. So I went out there, and I was, like I said, I did a little bit of a shuffle that they didn't find out about. And then I blacked out and woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. I had been stealing some stuff again. Who would have thunk it? And so anyways, at this time I wasn't as surprised. It was, and that was a night when I said I was only going to have 6. That's why that number 6, man, it'll get you. I went and had 6 airplane shooters because I had $7 in my pocket. I had 6 shooters of vodka and $1 for a Pepsi to finish it. And I knew if I had 7 that wouldn't work, but 6 was good. And then before you know it, I was all out of money. I didn't have any money, and I stole a bottle from a gas station and chugged it on my way back to the halfway house, and they were sitting outside waiting for me. And then I packed all my stuff because they kicked me out. And then as soon as I passed through the threshold of the door, I just black out. Next thing I know, I'm in a hospital bed handcuffed. So anyways, they sent me back to Pennsylvania. They ended up dropping those charges because they didn't have sufficient evidence, I guess. I wouldn't know. I wasn't there. They didn't have sufficient evidence, and they decided to send me out here. I'm telling all this part of my story in the hopes that maybe some of you can identify with the way that I drink and the way that I think. So they sent me out to Arizona to this really nice rehab, and by this time, I had found complete hopelessness. I knew that I was a ticking time bomb. Everyone has different fuses, different lengths, right? How long it's going to take. And for me, my fuse was getting shorter. I could stay sober for short periods of times, but I saw the truth. The truth is that I will always drink again. And I had been to AA before, and I knew what AA talked about. I could cite the big book, verse, chapter and verse, whatever they say. I knew the words. I had written 10, 20 goddamn inventories. I had made amends to people, and then 2 weeks later did the same exact thing and then got drunk again. I knew what AA was comprised of, right? But my heart wasn't in it. And I'll try to explain that in a little bit here. But that being said, I was convinced that AA wasn't going to work for me. They sent me to rehab, and I was just waiting. My lawyer had made it very clear that the next time anything happened, I was going to prison. And I mean, I don't consider myself a prison guy. I'm not a tough guy by any means. I didn't know how this could have happened. This was not the plan that I had. I used to be afraid of people like me. When I was a kid, I was afraid of thieves and bad people, and that's what I had become. All I could think about was how much I hated myself and how much I wanted to die, and I was too afraid to do anything about it. So I settled for rehab because I didn't want to go to prison. I knew the truth about myself. There was no more, you'll get it together this time, and this time it's going to be okay. That was all gone. I felt a bottom that I had never known before. So I'm sitting in this rehab, the shell of a human being, and they send me out to a place hereafter, as they like to do. And I was there for maybe a month or two. And, even though my lawyer had told me verbatim that if I drank again, I was going to go away for a few years minimum, as soon as they let me look for a job, I was drunk in 15 minutes. They dropped me off at the house, and it took me 15 minutes because I had to walk to the Safeway, and it was about a 15-minute walk. And before you know it, I'm drinking, a handle of vodka in the back of the Safeway, hiding from the construction workers looking at me. What is this guy doing? And I was drinking in the rehab for a few days, actually, before they found out. I wouldn't suggest it. It's a buzzkill. And, they found out I was in the middle of making steak and eggs. Nate was there, I think. And I wasn't even finished with my steak, and they made me, they said, you got to go. They wanted to take me and give me a breathalyzer, but and so I went with them, and then they gave me the breathalyzer, and I told them, like, I'm not drunk. I mean, maybe a little, but not that drunk. And but that didn't seem to, that wasn't the point, Pat. So we got to this place, and they said, all right, hand over your wallet and your phone and stuff. And you know what? I just said, you know what? Fuck this, man. This was January, I think, of 2019. And I figured, you know what? I would rather be drunk on the street in the cold than be sober for another goddamn minute at this place. And the guy was trying to stop me, telling me, like, it's cold. And it was cold. It was in the teens. And all I had was my sweatshirt and some jeans on. And I told the guy verbatim, you don't get it. I am doomed to die an alcoholic death. And now that sounds dramatic, but it's actually what I felt. That there was no way out for me. He didn't get it. He seemed to think he did get it because he's another member of Alcoholics Anonymous as well, but I didn't think that he got it. Recently, me and my sponsor and another guy were, I think Nate, you were there. We picked up one of this guy that Devin used to sponsor, and we took him. He was trying to jump out of a moving car as we're trying to take him to the psych ward to detox. And he's blubbering some stuff. I can't really comprehend it, but I tried to tell him, I get it, man. I get it, which I do. I've tried to jump out of moving cars. I've wanted to kill myself for years. And all he could say is, no, you don't. If he only knew how much I actually did, So I ended up spending like a week under a bridge, drinking like a handle of vodka a day. And then I ran out of money. That was the only reason I stopped, and it was cold. It turns out my parents had put like a missing person thing out for me, and some people who were feeding homeless people told me about it, and they contacted my folks, and they came and picked me up. And so I detoxed for about a day or so, shaking like a leaf and seeing things here and stuff, the whole nine. And my dad went, when he picked, I don't know if he went back, they live in Phoenix, they picked up my bags from the rehab, and I had a couple bottles of liquor in there still, and some water bottles, so it was party on. And back at my parents' house, and I also, as I like to do, was rifle through medicine cabinets every once in a while, see what I can find, and I found some Adderall, and what's that nighttime, what is it? Ambien, yeah, Adderall and Ambien. I took them at the same time. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew something would happen, I lived to tell the tale. So I'm drinking again, and so I called the lawyer, and he says, if you tell on yourself, you're going to prison. I said, I don't want that to happen. So they ended up sending me back to this rehab, and I really think I needed to go on that little bender. It seemed that most times, more recently when I was drinking, I would get caught pretty quickly. Something bad would happen. I just wanted them to leave me alone and let me drink. That was like the dream. Leave me alone, let me drink. That was all I ever wanted, and just people wouldn't leave me alone. And they left me alone, and I got a good little bender in there. And I realized that no matter how much I drink, I was drinking just about as much as you humanly can, and I felt like I got no relief. That was a bummer. So I got back to this rehab, and I ended up being there for a few weeks, and my gears are grinding. I can't do this anymore. But I'm not going to kill myself because I'm afraid. But I know that if they send me to the psych ward, if I tell them I'm going to kill myself, maybe they'll give me some Ativan at the psych ward to calm down and sleep. And so that was my plan. And I didn't know what was going to happen at that psych ward. So it doesn't really matter why you came in here, but maybe something will happen to you. And I went to that psych ward with the plan of cheeking some Ativan and just taking the load off for a little bit. And I don't know when exactly it happened, but I left that facility with some hope. um, I realized for the first time that I hadn't truly, sincerely given Alcoholics Anonymous a fair shot. This thing I was talking about of knowing the words, knowing the actions, but not being able to practically apply them finally made sense to me. I wasn't living the program of AA. I could talk the talk, but was I walking the walk? Yeah, you can go to meetings 3-4 times a day and still be a complete asshole. I don't know if you knew that. What happens when you leave the meeting? How are you treating the people in your life? What happens when you stand at another turning point? What are you going to do? Are you going to make a decision based on self? Or are you going to try something new even though you don't believe in it? Are you in enough pain? I realized all these things. I don't know how it happened, and it chokes me up talking about it, but I realized these things, and I found hope for the first time in years. Years. And I went back to that rehab, and I felt like a changed man. People talk to me about it and say, "Oh, Pat, when you looked horrible when you came back," and that was post a spiritual experience. Cut me a break, man. But I felt hope, and I ended up going to this halfway house, and I went there because I knew it was like structured. They make you do AA, and I knew I needed something like that. But it turns out, even if someone's making you do AA, making you go to meetings and take the actions, it's still up to me. Am I practicing these principles in all of my affairs? Or am I a big fat phony once again? I started really digging into this thing. My sponsor held off on going through a lot of the steps with me, and that confused me. Because I had heard a lot of people saying, and my experience was that you go through the steps quickly, and you try to have this spiritual experience, and then I don't know what happens after that, but you're supposed to go through it quickly. I think that alcoholics really like to feel better now, and unfortunately a part of growing up is feeling a little bit of pain. I had gone through my inventory. I had seen where I had been wrong, but was I willing to change my behavior on a daily basis like that? And my sponsor held off on me making any amends, and I wanted to get a new sponsor, right? Because I thought he was doing it wrong. And I called this old crotchety guy named Oscar, and he started helping me out a little bit. First of all, he wouldn't be my sponsor because he asked me, "Are you doing everything your sponsor's saying?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you?" And I said, "No, I don't know, maybe not." And I could look at it and see that I was not doing all the things he was telling me to do. See, I was doing the things that I thought were important and disregarding the other things that weren't important in my eyes. What I've found is that in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not about doing the big things. It's about doing the little things consistently, and that's where the spiritual experience occurs. It talks about it in the spiritual experience in the back of the book. It says some people have this overwhelming spiritual experience, the white light experience. You've probably heard of it before, burning bush. And it says, in our first edition, many people thought that this is how it's supposed to happen, and they said that's not true. Some people do, but most people don't. It says most people have what they call the educational variety, over a few months, practicing these principles. And most times, friends of the newcomer will see it before the newcomer himself. And he realizes that what it took years of self-discipline happened in only just a few months of trying something new. Paraphrasing here. I started practicing these principles with the help of my sponsor and the help of some other old-timers and some friends around me. And I realized that I had some unfinished business, that probation was still under the impression that I had been sober this whole time, and I definitely had not been. I knew that something came over me that is not like me. Let's just say that. I saw the truth, and no one told me this. My sponsor didn't say, "You got to do this." He didn't say any of that. My sponsor, I believe, is a very good sponsor. He shares his experience with me and helps me come to my own conclusions. He lets me experience things. Because he knows that if he even told me what to do, I wouldn't listen anyways. So he just tries to guide me. And so running out of time here. So, I knew that if I continued to be dishonest about my court stuff, that I might get drunk. There was a possibility that I might get drunk. Because one of the main principles in Alcoholics Anonymous is, well, they talk about honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I was pretty unwilling to do this because I didn't want to go away. But what I realized is that if I continued to be dishonest, I might get drunk. And if I get drunk, then I'm definitely going to get arrested for stealing shit, because that's just what happens these days. And I would go to prison anyways. But if I'm honest and do the next indicated right thing, I don't really know exactly what's going to happen. This was my first experience, real experience of this turning point we're talking about. I didn't know what was going to happen. But I was tired of living life the way I had been living it. You know, if you're not sure if AA is going to work for you, welcome to the club. No one believes that it's going to work for them, truly. I don't know if you knew that. Everyone's shaking in their boots, thinking, what the hell am I doing? But hopefully you meet someone like the people that I've met who share their experience, and you believe them, and you say, holy shit, this guy knows what I'm talking about. He's doing these things that make no goddamn sense, but he's having something happen to him, and he's found a way to be okay regardless of his present circumstances. So I listened to my gut, and I called my probation officer, and I tried something new. And I immediately regretted it, right? They said, Pat, you got to come back for sentencing. My lawyer said, you prepare yourself to go away for a few years. This is what's happening. And of course, I was a little upset. But after being talked to by a few people, I knew I had done the right thing. And I called some old timers, talked to some people, and they gave me the best advice that I've ever gotten in AA. And they said, Pat, rather than worrying about your problem, why don't you focus on the solution? Instead of worrying about what might happen, why don't you spend the next 24 hours working this program to the best of your ability? Trust God, clean house, help others. You got any better ideas, Pat? I said, no. So I said, okay. And I'll tell you what happened. The weeks before I had to go to sentencing, I was happier than I'd ever been, more free than I'd ever been. I knew a new freedom, you know, a new happiness. I was okay. And I remember we were at a conference in Phoenix, and my flight was in Phoenix, and I was on the way to the airport crying of gratitude that I had had this experience. I never felt gratitude before. I didn't know what that was. And I went in front of the judge, and some people had written me they wrote me some letters about my character. Those made me cry. That's not me. And I went in front of the judge, and I was fearless, you know. And because I knew I'd be okay. I knew, this is the most amazing thing. I knew that if I went away, it would be temporary. I know I'm dramatizing this thing really, but this is my experience. You know, I knew if I went away that it was temporary and it would pass and I'd be okay as long as I did these things. I had found freedom, and they could put me away, but I found freedom from me, which is the thing that I've always needed freedom from. I found that I'm my only enemy, not my own worst enemy. I'm literally my only enemy. And they let me go. They sent me back here with some probation and some fines. Now, it hasn't been all roses since that moment. I've had so many of these turning points come up regularly. Some are more extreme than others. Some are just small. But if you look back, if you pay attention, you'll see that if I went this way, I know what would have happened. See, what happens is when I make decisions based on self, it snowballs. And I don't feel good about it, and I start not being honest with people, and then there's that separation between me and you, and I got to make myself feel better. And before you know it, it becomes a good idea to start drinking. And I've been lucky enough to stay close to AA and be honest with a sponsor and with the people around me. I believe the only thing, that is really the only thing that is the reason why I'm standing here. Everyone gets off track in Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome to the club. But I know that if I stay close to people, I heard a speaker say it's like bowling with bumpers. That you're going to get off track, but if you got some people around you, if you're hooked up in a home group, and you're doing this deal and being honest, you're not going to fall off into the gutter. You're going to stay. You're going to have your experiences. You're going to learn, and you're going to grow, and you're going to hurt. But it's going to be okay. And maybe you can have some of that freedom. Since then, my life has grown by leaps and bounds, almost too quickly. And my goal now is to just stay as close as possible. AA has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. Because I was convinced I would die an alcoholic death. And today, I'm okay. And I'm more than okay. So, that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Pat. Let's give another big hand for our speaker tonight.